Hello, this video is going to be about the programs I did and the things I did while I was in prison. So, um, I think it's important to discuss this because when someone goes to jail or goes to prison or it's a short time or for years, um, they they can make a choice about what they can do while they're there. While your time may go on and on until you get out, there's things you can do, and certainly classes, and it depends on the state. Again, to as a reference, I did my prison time in Kentucky. Um, so the way that Kentucky does it, if you have different classifications of time and good time and credits that you can get while you're in custody in Kentucky. So if you take certain classes, you can get time off your sentence for that. If as long as you maintain clear conduct, you don't have any kind of write-ups or reports or disciplinary charges by officers, then you can get time taken off your sentence. If you're working, if you have a job in prison, granted it's basically slave labor, but that's the way that it's set up. So if you're working, for every week that you work, then you get a day off your sentence. So in a month you can get anywhere from 4 to 7 or 8 days. If you work in the kitchen, you can get a lot more days off because you tend to work doubles most days. Some of them doing a lot of the kitchens, the places that I've been at, the prisons I've been at. So that's how you can get time off your sentence. And as far as the credits, and there's some other things too, but they're not really worth talking about. One is the Commissioner's Award. There was a riot in Kentucky in 2009 at North Point, down in Boyle County, and some people got that Commissioner's Good Time Award for doing extraordinary things in the course of that riot. That isn't something that's given out too often. And you also have something called educational good time. Educational good time is reserved for classes there's certain parameters and requirements for it. But basically, if you come into prison and don't have a diploma, then if you get your diploma while you're in prison, then you can get 90 days of time taken off of your sentence. If you take certain other classes that are evidence-based classes, that typically recidivism rates go down, people take those classes and you can get 90 days taken off your sentence for that as well. So I took several classes. I don't have the certificates with me, obviously, because I'm in the car at work here, but you have several different types of classes you can take. You can take some that are just a 1 day kind of a quick thing. You can take some that are 6 months long. Take some that are more than that are over the course of a year. It just depends. But the classes that I personally took, the classes that got time taken off of my sentence, and I'll talk about the other ones as well, but there's two different types, basically. Classes that take time off your sentence and classes that don't. I took about an equal mix of both. So it wasn't really about, I was in custody for about over 6 years. So it wasn't really solely about taking time off a sentence. That was a good point and a thing that did help. But that isn't the only reason I would take a class. I would look at it and see if it was something that I wanted to learn, that I feel like I'd be better when I got out of prison. And if it was, then I would take it. Classes that I took were, one was called Pathfinders, and basically it's like a reintroduction to society. It talks about filling out job applications and preparing for an interview. There's some other components of it, but it's an evidence-based class, and the evidence shows that it does reduce recidivism if you take that class and complete it. So I took that. I took a Microsoft Office certification, so I had certificates from Microsoft. In Microsoft, the Word, the Excel, Outlook, PowerPoint, that whole software suite. It isn't a programming certificate. It's just a basic user certificate or class that gives you spreadsheets. It gives you an introduction to how Microsoft works and the things, the different types of software services that are in that suite. So that was a 6 month. All these classes, a minimum in Kentucky, any kind of educational good time has to be 6 months long at least in order for it to qualify for that 90 days credit. So let's see, Pathfinders, that I took something called MRT, but it was a veterans group component, kind of focus, but it's an offshoot of a class called Moral Recognition Therapy, and MRT is something that I cannot speak highly enough of. It's what's called a cognitive behavioral therapy class, and more or less what it does is it teaches you to look at thoughts and thought processes you have in your mind. When you're a kid and you see a piece of candy that you want and your mom or dad says no and you decide to grab it. Well, there's a choice in that. And so you make the choice to either grab that or not. And if you don't, then it can be a few different reasons. You're either going to get caught, or you just don't want to steal something, or whatever the case may be. But if you decide to steal it, then you're taking the risk that you can get caught. If you get caught, whether by the store owner, or the clerk, or by your parents, you're taking that risk of getting caught and then whatever consequences may happen. What MRT teaches you is to look at your actions and the consequences and what can happen and how those things can affect the rest of your life. So for class recently, we were asked to look at attorney ethics and cite an opinion in a case. There was a case of a lawyer in Kentucky that had several shoplifting charges. He was an attorney. He'd went through law school and had several shoplifting charges, and it was all for piddly stuff. It was like $300 worth of wine from a grocery store, and he got suspended from being able to practice law for a period of time. And then what eventually got him disbarred was that he agreed to represent a woman for free and then rescinded that offer and tried to give her a bill to charge her for that representation. So and she had a good amount of evidence to show that, and that wasn't good for him, but it was just his dishonesty that got him in trouble. So MRT is a very good class. I still think about it. I remember the instructor very well and the impact she made on me and the other people that were in there. I took that closer to before I got released. There's a program in Kentucky called the Substance Abuse Program, or SAP is what it's abbreviated as. It's not something I was ever recommended to take. It's not something I ever wanted to take. It's not something that I ever went through or had to go through because of the situation and the charges that landed me in prison. It wasn't something that I was required to take, whether it was recommended by the parole board or anybody else. So, but it's a fairly intensive, same kind of thing. It's a fairly intensive behavioral therapy type class that teaches you about about drugs and how your decisions can impact the rest of your life and can certainly lead to more criminality, get you to come back to prison, which isn't good. So Microsoft, Pathfinders, MRT, and so there's a few others. Here's what I took. One of the classes that I took that wasn't worth any kind of educational good time was one where it was taught by the Department of Public Advocacy, which is the public defenders, the state level public defenders office here in Kentucky. And that was a 2-week course, and it was taught at another prison. So when I signed up for it and was accepted, I went up to a prison in near Louisville at Luther Luckett Correctional Complex. I got there and took the class, and basically it's you have attorneys that come in. There's paralegals is also a component that paralegals teach. There's also a component that mitigation specialists that work in the capital appeals branch that are assigned to death penalty cases that they taught. And there's periods of instruction throughout the day, and you go back to your dorm in the prison, during the day or at night, and you have research you have to do, you have paperwork you need to draft up and bring to class the next day or work for. The final exam for that class, that course, is a mock. They give you a fact scenario, and they give you a period of time to complete it, and basically it's called a post-conviction appeal or attack on a sentence. They give you some facts. You have to draft a pleading that complies with court filings, and they grade it. And these are attorneys grading it, and so they don't hold anything back. They don't pull any punches when it comes to giving you your grade and telling you what you did wrong or what you could have done better, or what you did right. So it was a very valuable course, and I think it probably laid the foundation for me to be where I'm at now. 3 years into a 4-year paralegal degree. So it kind of sparked an interest and let me see what I could do if I continued to go forward in the law. The other courses that I took, they ranged from, there was one called Boundaries, and Boundaries is there's a book by a Christian writer. That's the thing about programs in prison in general, I'm going to say. Programs in prison, generally, a lot of them are religious based, and that's, I think, by design, because the only people that want to get involved in the prisons, other than the ones that have to be, like the state, are the churches. And the class itself was taught by the chaplain for the prison, so it was a very interesting course. It was not you didn't get any kind of educational good time for it, but it was something that I feel like should have that. The writer produced a book, or a series of books by the same name, called Boundaries, and it just talked about boundaries with your professional environment, boundaries with your family, boundaries with your children, and a lot of people, if you think about it, they don't have a lot of boundaries in their lives, and when they are growing up and going through life, they don't have that necessarily. So it's a good foundation, a good thing to teach people and to learn from. So programs in Kentucky and prisons in general are pretty wide and varied. I took one class. There was a floor buffing class, and they turned the floor buffer on, said work it for a couple of paths, and then you get a certificate. So it wasn't really much to it. And there's other ones, like I said, the Boundaries was a pretty prolonged course, and the legal aid training was pretty academically in depth. You had to learn pretty quickly about criminal procedure and evidence rules and a bunch of other things. Also took a carpentry course. Got a certification for that through the NCCER, National Center for Construction Education and Research is what it stands for. You also got an OSHA certification for that, and that's helped me since I've been out of prison. That's one course that I did use the basics of that as far as tools, and I've got a collection of tools at home, and I use them. Before I went to prison, I wasn't very tool adept. I didn't use a lot of hand tools or power tools, a lot in my daily life. And since I've been out of prison, I've made some furniture. I've made a bookcase, made a table. I like to grow that and get a few more tools, like a table saw and a planer and a sander, a few other things, to be able to make more things and have more fun at it. But I've got a chop saw and a jigsaw and a little hand sander and a router and a few other things. But that started that interest in being able to make things out of wood or out of other materials at that even. So there's plenty of offerings for courses. Now, the thing that I'll say about classes is that typically, if you're someone that's serving a life sentence, they tend to kind of not give people that are serving those sentences too much priority when it comes to those courses, because, they're going to be there forever, basically. And there's not really much incentive. If you have someone that's going to see the parole board in a year versus someone that is never going to get out and has already been served out in a life sentence, if the person that's seeing the parole board in a year or two has that course, that could help them potentially get released. So that's the thinking. That's the acceptance, I guess. And there's times that doesn't happen that way. But in general, I'll say that they try to give an equal opportunity of the courses, because those classes that you take, whatever it's carpentry or masonry or a cabling type course where you learn about fiber optics or Microsoft or whatever, it's a way to get you out of the dorm. It's a way to get you focused on something, and you can learn something new. But generally, they do try to give priority to people that honestly have a chance of getting out versus someone that has a life sentence. So I wish they would have more variety. And one thing about that I tried to do before I was released was I tried to get a victim offender reconciliation type program or restorative justice type program started in Kentucky, and that was, it fell on deaf ears. That wrote some letters and sent them to wardens of places that I was at. I had one warden write back and said, we tried that several years ago and it didn't work out. There was a tax issue or a money issue with it, with being able to pay for it, and also I guess maybe a perceived thought that wouldn't turn out well. I did an informal survey while I was in prison and asked people, if you could communicate constructively with your victim, would you, or their family, or whatever the situation was, whether it was a store that you'd robbed or the clerk or whatever, if you could sincerely apologize. And at the end of it, the models that I've seen, you come together at the end with the victim or the family and you apologize and you let them know, maybe why you did it, you answer any kind of questions they may have had. And that can be very therapeutic and very, very cathartic if it's done right and constructed or critiqued well or set up well. I think at the time the wardens and the prison staff that I talked to were hesitant to want to have people that may have questionable motives to do that. So that was, I think, the reason for that. But at any rate, I think it's it will be a good addition. Other states do it. Kentucky isn't one of those states that does it. So there's programs that are offered. It's up to you whether you want to sit in your cell all day or whether you want to get out and do things and expose yourself to new things and do new things. I tried to have fun in all the classes that I took, and whether they were educational, and I took time off the sentence or not, I tried to enjoy them. I tried to learn from them, and that kind of set things in motion later on for when I got out, that I could kind of take some different things and look at different experiences and learn from those, the same as I learned from those courses. So if you have a loved one or a relative that's in prison, one thing that helped me was getting the library and taking courses and classes. I was also able to take a college course that was very neat. There was a pilot program at the time. The class that we took was the pilot for this course at Blackburn, which is in Lexington. It's a minimum security prison, and they had 18 college students from the University of Kentucky right there in town in Lexington come to the prison, and we had basically a college class together. There was correctional officers that did security that were in the area that were around. They may have came in the class sometimes. They were welcome to. There was also cameras there. But they had two PhDs along with their class. It was a social work, a graduate level class, social work and sociology class. And the topic of that class was drugs and crime. So the question was, do people commit crimes to get drugs, or do people do drugs to commit crimes? And it's kind of a open to interpretation. I think that at the end of the class, we concluded that people typically, more often than not, commit crimes to get drugs or to get money for drugs, and that's how kind of criminality kind of starts. We learn that. So whether it's talking about your own experiences or people that said that drugs were the common denominator in why they went to prison or why they were arrested, or why their life changed drastically for the worse, whatever it may have been. That seemed to be the common factor. So they screened heavily for that class, and if you had certain things against you, then they weren't going to let you do it, and that's understandable. We had some people removed during the course of that class for conduct. You had to maintain certain things in order to continue in the class outside of the academic part of it. It was an academic part. We were given a certification or a certificate from the University of Kentucky, and it was neat. It was a very neat experience. So that's it for this video, I think. Just talked about programs. And if you have any questions or comments, put them in the description below or in the comments below, and I'll try to get back to you personally if anyone asks anything. So thanks.